Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Energy Speaks Back, powered by B2B Energy. My name is Paul Webb, and I'm the founder of B2B Energy, and I'm also your host. And weekly, I present to you energy experts from around the world. Welcome to episode 104. And this week, we go to Canada, where we meet with an energy expert who's part of a team developing game-changing metering. Our purpose, as always, is to provide a good understanding of energy management knowledge from around the world, which is available today for us to deliver energy savings that impact on our planet. On our journey of knowledge sharing, we would like to thank Esther Energy, who are our certificate partners, providing CPDs, continued professional development certificates, for our listeners. Today's special guest provides game-changing metering technology that enables the next generation of energy management. So without any further ado, I give you Paul Mertes. Good morning and good afternoon, Paul. How are you today?
Fantastic. Fantastic. Glad to be talking to you.
Right. And you're calling in from Canada today, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in a place called Mississauga. It's a suburb of Toronto, so we're in the Eastern time zone.
Right. And what sort of day have you woken up to? What's the weather like there?
Well, we've had an early snowfall and I think it's the first time I've ever put up my Christmas lights this early, but it's all
Wow.
gone away in the last couple of days. Now it's, I don't know, 6 or 7 degrees C and kind of blustery and not so great.
I know that when we've met through a mutual friend, Brian, and Brian Scott, that is, and we've obviously, I interviewed Brian, I think this time 2 years ago, and we was discussing the temperature then about how cold it was. And the UK's trying to be cold. It's very mild at the moment in the UK. It was quite cold when I interviewed him, but it's very mild at the moment. It's really strange things are going on here.
Brian is based in Calgary, and their weather is a whole lot different than where
Really.
they can. In particular, I know my associate was out there just 2 weeks ago, and it was about minus 18 or minus 20, and they have a thing called Chinooks where it can go from minus 18 to plus 12 in about 3 hours flat, and then they can have a couple of feet of snow. They're just on the doorstep of the Rocky Mountains, so they got an
Yeah.
entirely different kind of set of
Yeah.
circumstances.
I haven't brought you on here to talk weather, so don't worry about that. So, Paul, we have met obviously through Brian. We are connected on LinkedIn. So I know a little bit about what you're doing in the space here, but for the benefit of our audience, can you tell us about your origin story and a bit about yourself?
Sure, I'll try to be brief. But by training, I'm a mechanical engineer. Way back, I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I've always been interested in energy. I specialized in thermal fluids, and I spent the first few years of my career designing, HVAC systems in commercial and industrial projects, and got in the 80s into some of the earlier work with solar energy. I've just always been interested, in that more advanced aspect of it. Back then, actually, the oil was starting to get cheap. OPEC was kind of breaking up. It didn't look like the greatest way to put food on the table, and so I did what some engineers do, and I went back to school and I got an MBA in finance, and I went the business route. But
Right.
but I didn't live the industry. I stayed in engineering consulting in a variety of roles, but basically moved up on the management side and got into running engineering consulting businesses in infrastructure, in transportation to a great degree, and also in technology, and ended up getting a lot more involved with technology solutions and a lot of business in the United States, but also started doing business growth in Europe and in the Middle East, in the UK, in Eastern Europe, etc., and got really into technology at one point, where I became president of a subsidiary of Canadian National, which is a railway company. I was in charge of all of the technology that they developed. that brought me back to a focus on North America and just did a lot of turnaround management of businesses that were growing, as I said, in technology and in transportation. Ultimately, sort of about 20 years ago, got back into the engineering consulting business in a fairly large company in Canada as a senior vice president, and oversaw 7 different areas of the business, airports, rail and transit, et cetera, but also the commercial and industrial sector of large buildings and in the energy sector. And that kind of brought me back to a point where clean energy and climate change and that kind of dynamic was starting to emerge again as a force, which has not let up since. Subsequently, I got lured into my first startup because up until then I'd been basically an executive in companies of 100 millions or $1 billion kind of level, and I did a startup and then became the CEO of a geothermal energy company. And we grew relatively quickly. We faced some very strong headwinds in 2008 when we were raising money and the global financial collapse occurred.
Yeah.
Managed to work our way through that, manage our way out of that. We had a successful exit that made the investors happy, and I developed respect with a few people, one of which is a guy named Tom Rand, who became and is today, I think, Canada's leading clean tech venture investor. Tom at the time had founded a clean tech practice in what is now Canada's largest technology incubator called Mars, and that's in Toronto, and subsequently became a venture capital as he backfilled his position in the practice and raised some money to invest in some of the companies that were coming through here, so that we could be good Canadians and not take all our deals to the U.S., but actually fund things here. Tom came back and recruited me. Circuit Meter, the company that we're going to talk about now that I'm the CEO. He invested in Circuit Meter initially when I was basically pre-revenue, and then worked on selling me to augment the management team, who are tech geniuses. Basically, the founders are gurus in data processing, cloud communications, etc. And after saying no a few times, because I had enough of the early stage startup sector, I said, I looked seriously at it and I realized that energy data and the way that they were collecting it, the platform that they developed, is going to be a fundamental element of where we're going in fighting climate change and getting to net zero. And so I signed on. And since then, we've made slow progress. It's not easy to raise money for early stage companies. Venture capitalists kind of want you to be successful before they'll gamble and put their money in. It's kind of impossible, really, to take a company like this that relies on some wholesale changes in industry to really get a lot of growth and a lot of revenue without sort of a major league marketing and sales team, the kind that I used to run. So the middle ground has been to raise smaller amounts of money through angel investors, which we've done, and then gradually get experience in the marketplace, start to get up a small group of users, develop credibility both on the technology and on the economic side. And that's where we were. We were just starting to take off before COVID. And COVID kind of put everything on hold, and we sort of did some treading of water for 2 years. We had a few clients that had already, really got into this in a significant way. So they carried on installing systems, and we kind of had to wait it out. Now that we're through COVID, the whole world is basically evolving the way we had forecast. We've got a number of experts in commercial, industrial, and technology fields that say that our technology is head and shoulders above anything else in the marketplace, and that measuring energy usage and getting that up into the cloud and making it available for a variety of analytics, it's kind of one of the 4 legs of the clean tech table, if you will, and the market for our product and our technologies forecast to go from less than 4 billion today to 20 to 25 billion in the next 8 years alone, and then double again.
Yeah.
So it's very exciting. We have a leading technology in a huge growth area, and it's also very meaningful in that the planet needs to fight climate change. We need to accomplish some of these goals uh, and these net zero targets, and we're going to be a part of it. And we're going to, it's an impact investment.
So for you personally, you started off in the mechanical world and you've gone into the electrical electronics world, which for me seems when you was talking, I thought, oh, this is interesting. I wonder where this is going to. I'm electrical electronics, and I would have gone into that world quite easily. How have you found that transition regarding sort of your background?
Well, there's three things that I really sort of need to do this job, and I have two of them because this is really a business thing. And
Mm,
for 30 years, I've been a business executive,
yeah,
and I've been a business growth executive, and I've been in the technology, introducing technology and change. So that I've got. And then the mechanical electrical thing, yeah, it's kind of funny. I have friends from engineering school that are electrical engineers, and they think it's kind of ironic that I'm
yeah,
running
yeah,
a company.
exactly.
But in the end, you have to know how this stuff works. And
Mm,
basically, all of the equipment that the electricity that the power supplies is mechanical stuff. It's chillers, it's pumps, it's
got yeah,
fans,
yeah.
it's equipment. It's all stuff that is in my world.
Mm,
And before we just sort of took it for granted that the electrical guys will get us some power and they'll operate. I know how it all operates. I'm just less formally trained in how our actual equipment operates.
right.
But when you're running an organization, you don't need to be an expert in everything. You just basically need to
Yeah,
absorb, what things do and rely on the real experts to
yeah.
manage more detailed stuff.
So it'd be interesting to see that you could probably make those systems make run more efficiently from a mechanical point of view, which will then show us electrically. So that's a little bit of an in there, isn't there, regarding
Well, absolutely,
what's
and
in the back of
also,
your mind, obviously.
yeah, but also it's sort of like it's all about in a way it's also very much about industrial engineering. And back to my background in industrial systems, it's how you control quality, and it's parallel is really even into the automotive and manufacturing industry. How did they, back in the late '80s and early '90s, start to you learn a lot of lessons that really the Japanese automotive industry really started to perfect in total quality management, which is to measure everything, apply standards, have technology that makes the measurement automatic, and anything that deviates in real time, you bring it back, and you have a feedback loop, and they call things like Six Sigma, et cetera. But it's all about controls and industrial engineering, and in the end, and we can use all of the electrical data, particularly amp draw or the power use, to identify when things start to deteriorate, when they need maintenance, when they need to be replaced, et cetera. But also just you can use it to what we call forensic energy management or continuous energy audit, where you can go in and do a virtual energy audit and identify basically everything in a factory or building that is running inefficiently or improperly or unnecessarily. And you can squeeze all of the wasted energy right out of the system once you start measuring it.
You mentioned climate change right at the beginning of your sort of discussion here about being one of your drivers. Would you say that's a major driver into what you're doing today?
Big time, big time. I mean, uh, the major things that climate change are doing are driving a conversion from carbon-based fuels to electricity, mass electrification, and that has a cost. But which means you have to do things as efficiently as possible. So we don't need to if we don't need to install so many megawatts of windmills or solar, and we can do it by half because we're not using as much because we're operating
Yeah.
more efficiently, then that makes everything more affordable. But at an operating company level, if you want to upgrade your facility, et cetera, and you're reducing your operating costs because you're flushing waste out of the system, that makes you more competitive and more easily able to afford things. And then lastly, it's how it all comes together. If we move everything towards an electrical a grid where the main sources or many of the main sources are variable. That's wind and solar. There's two other elements technologically that we're going to need to make the whole thing work. And one is active storage. so that we can pull energy from storage when we need it, and also smart grid technology to govern the two-way flow of electricity. So smart grid, storage, and green generations are three legs of the table. The fourth leg of the table is energy efficiency, and at the basis of all energy efficiency is ongoing, detailed, continuous energy measurement.
Yeah. And for me, my favorite saying here is you cannot manage what you don't measure. So we've
Oh,
got
I've got that in a couple of my slides.
Oh, really?
Of course.
But so, we've got to start measuring, and it's for me, it's got to start off quite high level, and then we've got to go more granular, more granular. The deeper we go into these areas, we've got to take it into a low level. And I'm presuming, I haven't seen your systems as yet, but I'm presuming your approach is going to be to take it into, you mentioned the word chiller. So, we would look at monitoring the chiller on its own on like a sub-metering type method.
That's exactly what the vision is. And I'll just go back here to the vision of what our founders put down on a blank piece of paper and then achieved technologically. They were looking, about 12 years ago now, they were looking at the state of electrical submetering, and the submeters then, and even today, were really based on 80s technology, PLCs and things, and three circuits, one machine. It's a piece of hardware. The data doesn't go anywhere. There's maybe a readout. You write it down a number, or even before that, there was maybe even a dial or a gauge. It's that kind of thing, or a little digital counter that goes around. Very, very old, quite frankly. And they said, well, this is expensive, and it's doesn't do what we need. What we really need to do is take a building or a factory. We need to measure the electrical consumption continuously for every individual machine. Like right now, you get a bill from your utility once a month, and you know how much money you have to send them, and you get a certain a total of kilowatt hours and probably a peak kilowatt demand, because those are the two things that generally make up a bill. The vision for our company was, let's measure everything, whether it's a piece of production machinery, or it's something in the mechanical room, or it's an escalator, or it's lights, or it's exhaust fan in the kitchen. Let's measure everything, and let's measure continuously. Let's get the data into software where we can make some sense out of it and do some things with that data. And let's get the price for this whole thing down by a factor of 200, 300, 400. I mean, right back then, the cost per circuit for submetering was over $2,000. They adopted a target of, we need to get it to $30 to $50, because no one would have ever thought of doing what we're doing right now. I'll give you an example. Downtown Toronto, there's the Fairmont Hotel, and we're in there now, and the owners were smart enough a few years back to recognize that it was a prime candidate. It's almost 100 years old. Used to be the tallest building in the British Empire, going way, way, way back. Right. And so it had a wide variety of systems in it, of different ages and vintages and everything else. And they'd had an energy audit that said it was not performing well. So they knew there was lots of opportunities to save energy, but they didn't know where to start. So they said, let's do this. And right now we have 27 of our meters in there. Each meter can meter 16 three-phase circuits. So we're measuring almost 660 different circuits, or over 200 pieces of equipment. We decided, for practical purposes, not to bother spending money to measure the suites, because what people do there, you can't do anything about it anyways.
Yeah.
Basically, all the central systems and services were metered, and without getting into the total numbers, I'll tell you that we conceived, after talking to the management, that they could reduce the total energy consumption in that hotel feasibly by 35 or 40%, with those words. And when I put that into our little magic matrix and said, this is how much it's going to cost you to put the hardware in, to install it, to put the software in. We have a few third-party meters that we can accept that measure the BTUs coming out of the chillers, for instance, plus some engineering analysis. It worked out that they could feasibly, within 4 years, have a return on investment of 1,700%.
Wow.
And that's a staggering amount.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a
yeah.
staggering degree. And yet here we are a couple of years later, and they further discovered after we verified, after we went and did that and came back and discovered all these things and measured them, which is even better, that it was feasible for them to go completely net zero and financially attractive, actually. And so that's what's happening right now. They're in the
Mm,
process of doing a complete, what they call a deep retrofit. They're going to have heat pumps, and they'll be utilizing some deep lake water cooling and using Lake Ontario as a heat source and sink. But 100-year-old grand old lady in a beautiful hotel could be a state of the art net zero building,
yeah.
and it can be financially attractive. So that's where we're going, and Circuit Meter is in there in a big way, and it's our data that sort of made it possible. But at the other end of the spectrum, there's a smaller office building at the University of Waterloo called the Evolve One. And it was Canada's first net zero building. The CAGBC, the Canadian Green Building Council, designated net zero building. And we're in there with four of our meters, and it's a $25 million building. It cost them $25,000 to put our meters in. But the idea with that installation is that that's the way the future will be. And this will be standard to measure everything, because for them, it's not a matter of finding the low-hanging fruit and fixing the areas that you're wasting energy and addressing that, or maybe upgrading your equipment now that you've got a business case. It's about verifying that the building's very identity is legitimate. They are
Yeah.
selling this to the university and to their tenants, and to future tenants of Evolve 2 and Evolve 3 as a net zero building. They need to be able to prove and verify
Mm,
that it really is net zero. And so um, the cost, which is peanuts because we got the cost down for this kind of thing, wasn't even an issue. They said, well, that's nothing. It's a rounding, it's a rounding error of an afterthought, but it's critical to the identity of the building. I think that's sort of the two opposite ends of the spectrum. There's entire swath, basically all of our built infrastructure. Basically, every building you see, whether it's an apartment building, a condominium, an office building, a municipal building, or an industrial facility, all needs this level of metering to identify where it's wasting energy, and also to provide the financial justification for the upgrades. So
yeah.
that's the world that we're heading towards, and that's why I point back to a market estimate, a market forecast I made earlier on that says that this industry is forecast to go from 3 billion to 20 plus billion just in 8 years, and then double again. This will be a fundamental part of the whole green equation.
And presumably you're going to use your system to drive down the energy, and then you're going to use your systems to alarm it and impact and provide a message back to someone to say, we was using X yesterday, we've now used X now, which is above our tolerance. Does it
Exactly.
provide alarms and signals back to the operator, whoever needs to understand that?
That's exactly right. I mean, it could be that a machine, a piece of equipment, has had some kind of minor deterioration. Maybe a part is broken, but still operating. There you would not have noticed visually that there's an issue. What happens when a machine operates inefficiently is it turned, the energy is turned to heat. You can't see it,
Yeah,
and no one will know. This could go on for years.
yeah,
And that's inefficient. But when you measure the amp draw suddenly went up by 25%, then you can have that programmed into our software in the form of an alert, and that can tell someone, hey, go have a look at this, and I'll say, hey, there's 8 rooftop units, and why is this one suddenly using 30% more than all the other ones that are identical, the same age and things? Something to check out here.
What one
So
challenge?
that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, one challenge I've always seen with this form of technology in this industry regarding metering, main metering, sub metering, etc., and then finding where we're going to put these units is the actual logistics of getting that either meter picked up or installing a meter. How do you deal with those challenges?
Well, that's a good question, and that's part of our IP. Actually, one of the things that our founders were just way ahead of the timeline continually was this whole idea of internet communications. And so I mentioned before, still to this day, a great many meters are pieces of hardware. And if you want to get that data into the cloud, you have to have connected to a data logger and a modem and someone else's software. What the circuit meter platform does is it integrates state-of-the-art cloud communication technology right into the meter. So you just have to plug an Ethernet cable into the bottom of our meter, and in fact, we can piggyback on the host data system and go right to the cloud, and yet we're cyber secure. It's absolutely impossible for our metering system, despite the fact that we're on their network, to be used to hack in. It's 100% send. It's all outgoing. They don't need to open any ports, etc. We have not been refused by any IT departments, much as there's a great deal of fear in the industry. Oh, we don't want to talk to IT. They'll kill the project.
There's always those two ports. Always those two ports that need to be opened, isn't it?
Not with ours. As I said, we welcome an IT review. We never fail. And once we explain to them what they're doing, they go, oh, that's pretty clever. We have no problem with that.
Yeah.
And so that's one way that we got the cost down. The other reason we went to a 48 circuit meters. So there's quite a bit of scale because for instance, I mentioned the hotel, there's 600 circuits in there, but other buildings might be 200 or 300 circuits. The whole idea is to get the unit cost way, way down so that suddenly you're saying, oh, this is affordable, to throw a blanket over the building or the facility. And then back to the point about the communications, it's self-powered. You put it right beside a motor control center or the power panel, and it's wired in directly. Put an Ethernet cable in the bottom, and after that, the only thing you need is your laptop, because all of the data goes into the servers and is available through what we call software as a service. So it's basically all of the software is available online, and it's designed as enterprise software. So, for instance, there's an American manufacturing company that's got a great deal of passion for energy management, and they phoned me. They found us a few years back and said, "Listen, this is what we want to do. ISO 50001 is good, but it's not good enough. We want to measure every piece of equipment on every production line in our facilities, plus all the major pieces of equipment in the facility. We want to do it in real time. We want to set baselines. We want to set thresholds. We want the software to tell us when anything is going out of specification, and we want to do it around the world." I said, "Well, that's exactly what we're designed to do. This is great. Yeah, let's get started." As it turns out, they did a pilot in Scotland, in Kelso, and within 6 months, they had reduced their energy consumption in that facility by 25%. And that was the basis upon which they went global. We're now in their facilities in the United States and Mexico, Romania, Malaysia, China, and it's all available. Their energy management director is actually in Scotland, and he can look, at what a single piece of production machinery is consuming in amps at this very second anywhere in the world.
So it brings me on to the next challenge in my mind. So we've got it installed. We're bringing all that data back. How do we educate then the user to read, analyze all that data that's coming back? Or do you provide some form of AI into the software, or do your team help analyze that data?
There's a few different aspects to that. First of all, the software is super powerful in terms of and easy to use in terms of how you visualize the data.
Right.
And so it's point and click stuff. It's really powerful, and you can make complicated dashboards, simple dashboards, etc. That being said, it depends on who the end user is. So, for instance, the company I was just talking about, well, they've got engineers on staff, they got professional people. All they needed was a little bit of training, an hour course, and they go, "Well, this is fantastic. This is easy to use." They call us back every now and then for customer support. "Hey, just a little unclear. Like, how do we do this feature or that feature? Just normal stuff." But the flip side is, that hotel I was mentioning. Well, the people in the hotel they're too busy running the hotel, even the operations and
Exactly.
maintenance people. And so in that case, we provided an additional service, which we called virtual energy audit, where we bring energy specialists in and we do the analysis. We present them with a report. And then we do initial system training. We set up the dashboards for them and they can use it and reference it. And so it just depends on who the end client is and what their level of resources are, and whether they want, whether they can do it, or whether they're not. And then I guess the last part of the equation is sort of the in between. And our business model, which is just kind of starting to get some momentum in this area, is that we want to work through channel partners,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
there's a whole industry of companies that provide this kind of service to their clientele. And so, our objective is not to try and elbow them out of the way and bring this technology to the world. That's completely unworkable. What we want to do is, and Brian is one of them, and what's he said this, he goes, I've got so many clients. So, let him take our technology to their clients to the extent that they need these kind of services, or he provides them to us. All we do is basically give him initial training on how to do it. He's a tier one supplier. Then he provides the actual. He does the actual selling. They do the actual technical training. They do the
mhm,
actual support stuff, and then they just come back to us if they need tier two support for something that
yeah.
they don't quite know how to handle.
Hmm.
So, we're doing some of this now in the UK. We've got a few clients that are just getting ready to go national. Energy measurement in the UK, I don't have to tell you how much concern there is about, rising bills and everything. And, grinding efficiencies
Yeah.
is a critical part of the whole future of the energy infrastructure.
What levels of unit reporting? So you've just started talking about global reach with this software. Will I be able to convert kilowatt hours into pound, shillings, and pence in the UK, dollars in America and Canada? Maybe is it
Yeah, I
got that
mean,
capability? Is it?
yeah,
So sorry, I should have asked. Have you got a financial model, a financial application on this as well? So can I tell how much it's costing me?
Yeah, yeah, and so basically, it's just a variable that can be changed in the software, and could be the currency. Is it's just a national thing, so you just input
Yeah,
it, right,
yeah, yeah,
and set the cost based on what your on what's going on in your industry. But the universal variable for us are amps and volts. So we'll measure kilowatt hours. That's measured, and that
yeah,
comes into our software. And then the user can input exactly what their costs are. And then when you're putting up your graphs and your curves and
yeah,
et cetera, then you can basically specify, do I want this to be a financial variables, or do I want it to be an energy variable?
yeah. Can it report on carbon?
Yes, it can. And the way we do that is, and this will evolve, but um, every jurisdiction in Canada, the United States, if there's a state and the province level, has an official sort of conversion factor from kilowatt hours to carbon equivalents. And as I said, it's totally expected to evolve, because
Yeah,
reality is that that's an average number, and different regions get their energy in a very dynamic way from different places that have different carbon footprints. But from a legal perspective, at the jurisdiction level, there is an official conversion factor, and that's generally available everywhere online. So what we do is we just tap into whatever the online source is, and then whenever that number changes, then that number changes. The link in our software changes. So,
yeah.
but the reality is that it's very simple mathematically. It's just a scalar multiple. It's you multiply your kilowatt hours by some number,
Yeah,
and you have carbon equivalent.
of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah. So
Um,
it's really just a glorified calculator, but more and more and more, having to generate these reports is not just something that takes up time, but it's something that's becoming critically important. We have a couple of clients in Canada, and the number is going to grow, that have European parent corporations where things are a bit more aggressive in this area. But they've been told by the end of 2023, you must be able to verifiably with veracity report on your carbon, because we have global clients that are demanding this of us, and we're going to lose, pick some big automotive company, and say we're going to lose them as a client if we don't do this. So you will do this. Yeah. So they made the intelligent jump to say, well, rather than make this a cost exercise where we got an accountant or two running around adding up numbers, we could be more proactive. We could make it a management exercise, and we'll make it an energy management exercise where there's great potential to reduce our energy costs and actually become more profitable and more productive, and the carbon number will be spit out as a byproduct.
Is there a way of bringing in the history of data as well? So, I put the system on, I turn the system on today. Can I bring in last year's data somehow of what was happening last year or the year before? Some historic.
Not
I can do comparisons.
What you can do, I mean, basically, our database starts when you plug the meter.
Of course, yeah.
Populates and goes forward. However, we got a couple of things that you could do with our data to export it somewhere else. So if you've got another database with all your historical records in it, you can cherry pick data out of our data and populate that and have something that's merged in with your historical database. We have an API that means you can pull data continuously, just any specific data you want, and pull it into other energy management systems if you're already using an energy management system. Or if it's more cost data, I mean, if it's say an ERP system or something else, you can pull stuff with the API, continuously live into other software. Or if there's just specific data sets, you can very quickly click it and set it up in a table and export it as a CSV file too.
Yeah. Well, I've started getting some really good ideas and pictures. We are going to go through some demos of your products, but it's really interesting to see. I like the way you've addressed all the challenges I've been putting in front of you, and I think you've got something there that's quite powerful in what you've done. And you've obviously, your team have thought of all the issues around what, from cost down to the technical capability of this product. So, is there anything, it's come to this time in this interview really, is there anything you can give back to our industry regarding what you're doing today?
Yeah, let me think about that while I just throw out a couple other things I think are important that sort of play on that came to my mind while we were just talking. One is other things that are going on as we speak in the industry, and in particular, you'll see it across the UK and across Europe and certainly across Canada and the United States. More and more organizations, private sector companies, as well as municipal and state governments are either more the government declaring sort of a climate emergency or organizationally adopting net zero targets. And then in the ESG world of governance, trying to adopt, if not a net zero target, an energy efficiency target, and then backing that up or bolstering it with more qualitative statements that they're going to adopt best practices in energy management. And we're talking with national organizations in Canada and the United States right now that have already done that, they're already on the record, and yet they don't really know how to do it. And they get a commitment, and then one level below, there's people that are energy management, and they're scratching their heads and they're going, well, I don't know how to do it, and it's a big order, and I don't know how we're going to afford it. And what we're coming in and showing them is like, I'll pick a nameless company in Canada that's got 100 facilities, commercial facilities across the country, and we're saying, like, you can go through and implement what we're doing in a way that is cash flow positive. Like, let's there's numbers out there, and averages are only ever right every now and then, but across the board they're kind of right. there's numbers out there that say 30-35% of energy is wasted. You just have to know where it is, et cetera, et cetera. If you knew where it was, you'd probably do something about it. Well, we can go into say one of these buildings that's using say $400,000 or $500,000 a year of electricity, and put in a bunch of our meters, bundle in some of our services to analyze data, include the installation and the software, et cetera, and still have and then put it on a finance basis so that over 3 years they're buying all the stuff, they're getting the services in the first 6 months, but it's still coming out to 3, 4, 5% of their monthly energy bill. Whereas within 6 months, if they're getting, if we identify a 5% saving, and say in the second year we buy it and we get another 5% saving, which is way, way below what you'll really get, you're already sort of into cash flow positive, so you can afford it. And then, so that's what we're doing with some of these companies. We're doing, a few buildings right now just as a pilot to prove that this is true. But by measuring everything, putting it in a database, you're adopting the other things that are in these best management systems. So it's, in other words, continuous energy audit. We can now budget energy. We can get into more advanced capital budgeting. Okay, now we know what the business case is to upgrade these chillers or these rooftop units, or even in that big case of going completely net zero. We've got the data we need to drive a truly aggressive and super granular and detailed energy conversion plan. So all of a sudden you're able to tick all your boxes on the ESG front of things. And that's really, really great, because that's where ESG is going. And say, hey, yeah, you can do that and save money. So that's great. The flip side of the coin is that, in particular, in key jurisdictions in the United States, and New York is the leader. New York City passed laws already, Local Law 88 and 97, that are giving all the building owners only until 2025 to install submeters and then start to make improvements. And if they don't hit certain levels of energy efficiency, they're going to get big fines, 7-figure fines. So we've now got clients that are in the process of gearing up for all of this, and they're being forced to, at the same time that New York State is subsidizing what we do. They call it real-time energy management. They get a 40% subsidy on what we do on the installation, on what energy management people do for 5 years, because they want to speed it up. So there's a carrot and stick thing going on out there. And I believe like Boston is now copied New York. And I believe that these kind of more aggressive public sector initiatives are going to speed things up at the same time that the private sector, or the more aggressive companies in the private sector, are realizing this makes sense anyways. We can actually be more competitive and save money. So these are the bigger things that are happening out there in the public and private sector. The last thing I want to throw in there is where are we going? Because mostly what we're just coming to market right now with this technology, but the world is demanding it. But in the more sophisticated world that people hear about, artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., there's going to be a lot more developments coming in the future in terms of software, but they all require energy data. Yeah. And our meters, we're sensing voltage on every circuit that we measure at 200,000 samples a second, and and current is at 12,500 samples a second. This kind of really granular energy data is what you need to fuel all this more advanced AI kind of software. And we're right now working with 6 Ontario universities that I think there's about 18 PhDs working on more advanced AI software. And this is the very, very beginning of that whole field. But wherever all this goes, they all need data. They all need data in the cloud, and they all need software and tools to work with it. So, there's a lot of examples out there right now of how this stuff can pay, and there's even more stuff happening in the future.
And what do you think the message is to give back to the industry? What do we need to do?
I think that everyone in industry, when it comes to net zero and energy management, has to be a little bit more open-minded and proactive about what the possibilities are, because as we get out there, we don't really have. We're just in the process of doing the financing to build up a marketing sales team. So we're hitting our targets relatively slowly because the size of our team. But as we get out there, there's mostly a great lack of knowledge about, oh, you can do that, you can do that. I had no idea. How will we afford it? Oh, you can afford it like this. And as a matter of fact, it's really low cost. And I had no idea.
Mm.
There's a lot of benefit financially.
So what would worry me is there's a lot of systems out there trying to achieve that, but they're not all the, there's a marketplace out there for people to go and buy from. There's a marketplace of all these different systems, including your technology. Where how do they make them decisions? I think that's the issue. They need to find a solution that best fits them. I know you've got a lot of benefits around what you're doing, but how does that user go and find that system that best fits what they're trying to achieve? And I know it's a bit of a biased question to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure if I can provide any special advice there, other than to say, got to do your homework.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, in our particular field, we hired an ex Schneider senior executive to do market study, compare our stuff to everything else, and we kind of told us stuff we already know, but it was better for it to be in writing, and being produced by someone else because it's helpful for investors, etc. But there's tons and tons and tons of technologies and meters out there, and I can imagine if you're not into it, it's going to be very confusing. And that's part of our challenge too. Is you said, well, you got to go through sort of a list of features. And does it do this? Do this? Does it do this? Can you talk to people that are using it? What's it cost? I mean, the people
from our point of view, we need to make sure. Sorry. So Paul, so from our point of view, really, as technology providers or consultants, we need to be providing very good, clear case studies, proof that it is the right technology to be using for them as a user. I think that is key in getting all that knowledge out there. And from my point of view, is the education side, educating organizations to go out there and really understand what they're trying to achieve regarding data and managing that data. Incidentally, I used to work for Schneider in a different guise, if that makes sense. So I worked for Satchwell and I worked for IMServe. They both got bought by Schneider, and they were both developing things like this. So I've got a lot of background regarding Schneider and BMS and energy monitoring systems. Yeah,
I get one. You did touch on something there, which is sort of a weak point for us and a problem area overall. We're asked all the time for business cases. We have very few. I mean, if we sell our technology to a third party, they don't report to us. So we don't necessarily have documented. We even have some that made us sign NDAs, and we know they love the product, and they won't tell anybody. That drives me crazy.
That's a shame, really, because I think the organisations have got to share that case study. I think it's important to prove that it works.
What they're doing in energy management is not what is driving the competitiveness organization. I think that they should share it too. But hey, if we sign an agreement, we sign an agreement. Whereas others very generously say, "Yeah, please, tell the world."
Yeah, I've worked for loads of organisations that don't want me to tell the world that I've actually made them big savings. It's strange because I think that just creates encouragement and awareness that it can be done.
Absolutely. So, it's one of those things where the people who are more knowledgeable are more likely to know what they're looking for. And so in the end, I realize certainly as we plot our big go to market launch, there's a marketing element as well as a sales element. We have to go out there and we have to get as many sort of industry technical conferences and things like that and put our papers out and get the message out, because what we're doing is radically different than what was done before. and it was never feasible. It was never economically or technically feasible, but it is now, and the world is moving to a place where they really need it. So, the time is great, and yet there's not a lot of history to look at.
So, Paul, how can we find you? You and your product. Is there a website? Obviously, LinkedIn's a good.
www.circuitmeter.com. Uh, Very easy to find. And we've got a portal that you can engage with us, and I'm available at paul.mertes, that's Mertes, at circuitmeter.com. And we are actively seeking interest. So it's our mission, and we we like to talk. We like to talk about it, and getting us to shut up, I guess, is the real hard part.
So, Paul, I'd like to thank you for your time today, and we wish you we wish you luck with and success with this technology. As I said before, you cannot manage what you don't measure. It's a very important technology around our industry, and I'd like to thank you for sharing your knowledge around that today. So, thank you very much.
I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. It's a mission.
Brilliant, Paul. Thank you. You and your family, please stay safe in these times.